All right, guys. So we're going to go ahead and launch into chapter 16 here. This is going to be, starting today. There's sort of a tone shift in PFT 106. Today is the first day we're going to start getting into our populations. Today's populations, we're going to do two of them. They're not necessarily big adjustments, that we're not actually dealing with any comorbidities or diseases. We're just dealing with sort of like life cycles, so like Thomas, for instance, you've already been through our entire youth program design class. So a lot of this stuff is going to sound real familiar, just super watered down. They basically took that entire certification and they're going to put it all on one page. And the same thing is true of the senior population as well. So we're going to be doing youths and seniors today. So it'll feel really, really, really gentle. But we're just going to sort of talk about some of the physiologic differences there and training adjustments that we're going to make when working with either of those populations. So talking about seniors, at the end of this mod, our program design class is going to be senior program design. So, if you feel like it is moving a little quick and, maybe there's something you want answered, please feel free to ask, especially because this is going to go so fast today. But also, just know that we've got an entire 10 days dedicated to, the senior population coming up at the end of this mod. So, yeah, so we're not seeing any diseases or anything, but there are going to be some training adjustments that you do need to make. And that's sort of what we're going for today. It's like, how do you modify the rules, So we'll start with youths. Youths are going to refer to ages around this is actually, there is a slight discrepancy in your book compared to the youth manual. There's a slight discrepancy here. They're considering youth age 6 through 20 here in the regular book, but it's 6 to 18 in the sort of practical world that we live in, or in the youth certification. So I do always like to point that out. I think my two Thomases are the only ones that are going to actually deal with that right now, but I always like to bring it up because it is actually a slight discrepancy there. But 6 through 20 children are going to be aged 2 through 11, and then adolescents are going to be considered age 12 through that 20 year, because there is just a little bit of development that continues happening. I mean, obviously in this country we consider 18 to be an adult and stuff, which is fine, but there is a little bit of physical maturing that still is going to occur in those next 2 years, which is why some people, if you ask them, adolescents are up to age 20 there. And again, that's one of those things where it's well, which is the correct definition? I don't know. Nobody can agree. So if you ask me, it's 18. If you ask somebody else, they'll say 20. Some people are well, technically you can continue maturing even into your mid 20s. There's still some stuff that happens until 25. That'd be crazy, right? Can you imagine gyms have extra special waivers for anybody 25 and younger? That would be very weird. So anyway, talking about a youth program, obviously there's going to be some training adjustments that we need to make here, right? So just giving you a couple of fun statistics about the youth stuff that we've talked about before. Youth fitness is actually one of the fastest growing segments in health clubs in general, which is really great because that means that if you are interested in working with youths and stuff, there's a lot of business in that. My buddy, my ex-student slash, just a good guy, Jay Howard, when he graduated, he got right into teaching youth boot camps and stuff. I wish that I freaking had him. I'm not sure I have him on social media. I'm sure he does social media. Jay Howard. Yeah, he has some stuff. He doesn't post, I feel that often, but he's been doing training camps and stuff. And he does a lot of speed, agility, and quickness training, and he's working with teens and adolescents and stuff like that, and he is just crushing it. I mean, his business is booming. He graduated, his class was, it's so sad, his graduating class was the first COVID class that I had. Like he's on, like if you ever go through the YouTube channel and you go back to like the first videos that I ever posted, he would be like in that group because like it was like, hey, have you heard this like virus coming out of China? I was like, guys, don't even worry about it. There's no way it's gonna hit the US. Like I remember like, and then like 1 week later, it was like, yeah, we're closing. Like we the whole country. I remember just like totally just being like, there's no way. But oh, and there he is hanging out with his oh my god, I remember this day. That's funny. That goes to show you how little he posts. Wow. But he's absolutely killing it. I mean, he's got over 100 clients, I think, at this point. He's only been training it for, I guess a little over a year and a half at this point, would be when he is kind of launched and going. So year and a half, and it's all because he's doing like a lot of youth training, he has like a niche. We next mod, we'll have our professional development class. We're going to talk about like developing your niche, get yourself a reputation for being particularly good at a specific skill. And that can be a really, great thing to have on your resume. For me, it was always corrective exercise. And then it's so funny now, I ended up going to like Biggest Loser and stuff and doing like a lot of weight loss stuff. Then I got kind of known as like the weight loss guy, the nutrition guy. That's fine. I'll lean into whatever, reputation I sort of develop. And I think that that's like a really valuable skill for you guys to have. So think on that as we're moving through this youth stuff today. Just know that it is a massive segment of the fitness industry and it is kind of growing really quickly. Mostly because we do see childhood obesity continue to climb every single year. It's definitely not slowing down. But we do know, one of the ways to sort of combat that, right? Like one of the best ways to sort of, fight against childhood obesity is just simple like physical activity, right? We are recommending that adolescents or youths, really anybody, should get at least like 60 minutes of physical activity per day, right? And then children can get even more than that, right? But ideally at least an hour of activity. The way I always like to put it is like, for an hour a day, I want you to get a little bit of sunshine and a little bit of out of breath. It's my favorite way to summarize it. You do a little bit of those two things together, we're going to be in a great spot, So there are certain like, if we're looking at sort of like the causes for all this, right? Like if we're trying to figure out like, it's like, we live in I was just talking to my girlfriend about this the other day. We were talking about like how we live with, amazing technology. Running shoes have gotten better and better and better, yet we see more and more and more foot and ankle injuries. And it's like, what the heck, if our technology is supposed to prevent all these problems? And it's like, well, at some point, technology just doesn't work anymore. Like maybe it's that it's us, we are not being physically active. We're not, strengthening our ankle the way we're supposed to. I think the same thing is true of like why, we live in a world with like, there are more gyms in the world now than there ever have been. There's more information online for fitness and nutrition than there ever has been, but it is not being it is being outpaced by, how many things are pulling us away from that physically active stuff and how many things are pulling us away from like healthy meals, even though we have like, amazing access to like healthy food, we have way more amazing access to unhealthy stuff, right? We have access to physical activity, but we also have these freaking things in our pocket every day, and so there are definitely like a lot of influences, right? Some of the reasons could be cultural, obviously your culture is going to have like an impact on like your diet and exercise, I know that like being from like the Northwest, it tends to, my just growing up around like a lot of like outdoorsy stuff, it's always feels like, if I spend too much time indoors, I start to get really, really antsy. And I'm like, I need sunshine, I need fresh air. And I go crazy. I get really antsy. Some of it could be social, right? I know that my parents both worked like crazy, that definitely influenced like the fact that like sometimes like our idea of like what a healthy meal was is maybe a little bit different than what I know it is as like a nutrition professional. Like my parents to this day will send me pictures and like, look, we did good, and like they'll send me like a healthy meal, and it'll be like a giant steak and a giant thing of mashed potatoes and like a little couple pieces of broccoli, and I'm like, you did a protein like I told you, you did a starch like I told you, and you did a veggie like I told you. Now we just need to work on the proportions, right? Like,
Yeah.
but like in their brains, like socially, right? Like where they go, they're like they've been told that that's healthy.
Yeah, I have a friend
Um,
of mine who showed me cause he was trying to get healthy too, right? So he has a big old plate with like four like yolk eggs, like I don't know, I think it was like three big ass like pig pork bacon, and it had avocado yeah, pieces of avocado. What else
okay.
did it had? A bunch of rice. And
Oh,
I'm just like, bro, these are like good, healthy, nutrient meals. I mean foods, but the portions, bro, like you're technically
yeah,
eating about like over like 1600 calories right there, man. That's a lot of
right.
fats too in there. I'm like, bro, you gotta
Yeah,
manage those things.
yeah. My buddy Andrew, he was my roommate at the time. He was like on a diet, and I was like helping him, and he was like, I don't know what the deal is. I'm not losing weight. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, bud. And because he didn't want like, he didn't want to like he was like, can you just give me like advice? I don't want you to train me. He was like, he didn't want to get like too close on that. And I was like, sure. And I was like giving him advice, and he was like, yeah, I don't get it. He's like, I'm just stuck on a plateau. And I was like, huh. And I like went into his room at one point, and I remember seeing this giant bag of like walnuts and like a giant bag of like trail mix. And he was like, and I was like, ooh, buddy, like nuts are super good for you. They're super healthy, but they are also exceptionally high in calories. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
you are putting good stuff into your body, but unfortunately, you're putting a little bit too much of it. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, watch this. And I like pull like a handful, and I was like, this is 200 calories. And he was like, what? Like, yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
scary moment for him. But uh
Yeah.
so um so
I had
some of
a
it's
friend,
geographic as well, right?
right?
Obviously where you live, where you're kind of growing up. If you have more, if it's like out here, right? For instance, like I remember living where I'm from, I never had to worry about putting sunscreen on ever. That did not ever cross my mind. Out here, it's like if you don't do it, like it's like you're a tomato in one. For me, it's like an hour in the sun,
Mm.
and like I'm burnt. But yeah, sometimes it's geographic, or like where I'm from. It's also like gyms. Like this is so funny. Playground covered. We didn't call it go to the playground during recess. We called it go to the covered court because Oregon rains constantly. So our basketball courts did not look like this. Instead, they look like this. Like um, it made no sense that like nothing was uncovered. It was always like a structure, and there was a basket, like which keeps you even further out of the sun. So again, geography is playing a role here, right? Economics are playing a role here, kind of going back to like that social environment, right? Your economic status greatly affects like what you're going to eat. Certain nutritional factors just, and in terms of like maybe like education levels and perceptions, right? That's a big one as well. Again, some people consider one thing to be healthy, other people consider it to not. uh and then there is biology at play. Like, make no mistake, like it would be very arrogant for us to just say that like physical activity and nutrition are the only factors that are playing a role in terms of like childhood obesity and stuff. Obviously your biology is going to play a role there. We all know that one guy who eats and eats and eats and eats and eats and then just never gains an ounce. Like, we all know that person who works out like crazy and struggles with their weight. There certainly are some biologic factors there, but um, no matter what, we know, when it comes to like these causes of like chronic obesity and stuff, no matter what, the one thing that we do know is that when it comes down to the law of thermodynamics, right, which is studying, the amount of energy that is coming in versus the amount of energy that is coming out. Um, if there is a surplus of energy coming in, it will always result in weight gain. And if there is a deficit of energy coming in, it will always result in weight loss, no matter what. Now, obviously, some people were dealt maybe a bad starting hand, you know. Again, if you have like genetics that are just like causing you to gain weight a little bit more easily, maybe you just like don't have the fastest metabolism in the world if you're born that way, hey, that is a bummer for sure. In terms of like if you are trying to like lose weight, if you know, that is a tough starting hand. But if we believe and we know that like it is energy in versus energy out, it just means that we can work around like what your starting hand is, you know. um just like you know, monetarily, right? It's the same thing about like your income. It's like, hey, you were, you know, I was dealt, I wasn't exactly dealt the greatest hand. You know, my parents couldn't afford to pay for my college, you know. Like that's not something that could happen, right? Versus some people, yeah, they're like, I see these posts on Instagram all the time where they're like, look at this 22-year-old couple that bought their first home and now they're millionaires. And then like they get on there and it's like, yeah, it's you know, we just worked really hard. And it's like, and then my parents paid for, you know, this, and we lived with them for the first couple of years. It's like, yeah, like I don't have that option, right? Like, you know, like sure, but it doesn't mean that like we can't get there, right? It just means a different starting hand. Which is why I always tell my clients when it comes to like weight loss, you know, because sometimes they're like, you know, it's like, oh God, I wish my genetics weren't so bad. And it's like, okay, it's a, you know, sure, if you feel that way. But now that we're aware of it, let's just work around your genetics. Let's work around your environment. Let's work around your social factors. Let's work around your geography, you know, whatever it is, we can get there. That's very encouraging. You know, again, if we believe that function follows form, I think that that's the most motivating thing on the freaking planet. That's why I say it all the time. And then the other side of it that we got to be aware of, the biggest thing that we, you know, have a positive impact on that is honestly easy for us to change is like our diet and physical activity, right? The more physically active we are, we know that's going to have a positive impact on how, you know, on like us moving around and stuff. Like yesterday, so Saturday we had our big annual like award show for the charity that everybody in my house works with. And so it's a big deal and it's a big party every year. And you know, we stayed out, we went out afterwards and like stayed up until like 2:30 in the morning, and I was completely exhausted on Sunday. Yeah, which I, you know, I never do, but it's like this is the time of year. It's like we always blow off steam like at this event every year, and completely wiped out this weekend. And woke up Sunday and had to go to a memorial, which was a, you know, getting up early after this like crazy event, go to that, came back, and I was like, man, like I'm so tired. I'll bet like I'm gonna end up like doing nothing all day. And I was kind of curious, and so I glanced at my, you know, my little watch here, and I was like, how many calories have I burned? I was like, yeah, like I'm moving slow, you know. Like Sunday is like a low energy day. But then like I was like, all right, well, stuff I got to get done. I got to finish decorating for Halloween and, you know, and hanging out and stuff. So I did like a little bit of like small decorating. And just that, being outside, getting up on a ladder, hanging stuff, I ended up like burning more calories yesterday than I do on like a normal Monday through Friday when I lift and I work out, you know.
Yeah.
It's not always about the gym time. Sometimes it's just about being active, you
Yeah,
know.
just moving around doing things.
Yeah. And that's where the youth stuff comes in as well, right? Get your, you know, encourage your youth clients to get up off the phones, to get out and just go for a walk sometimes, you know, do something physically active. All right, so now that there we go, there's my soapbox talk. And now we'll get on to now we'll get on to some of the physiologic differences here. So physiologically, obviously, there are going to be some big differences between youths and adults. One of the biggest things is that children are going to have a peak oxygen uptake rather than your traditional Vo2 max. So your Vo2 max, right? We'll talk more about this in physiology classes and stuff, but it is the volume of O2 consumed at maximum. So it's the volume of oxygen consumed. It's the maximum volume of oxygen that you can consume. It is generally considered the best way to test someone's cardiorespiratory efficiency. The more oxygen you can consume, the better, is basically what that means. So if you consider that, like in a cell, right? You consider like in a cell, you have your mitochondria, right? That's not quite giving me the picture I want. Cell and mito. So, you know, this is sort of what your cells look like, right? In general. And then inside of all of them, you're gonna see the little mitochondria, right? If we look at this little cell here, right? These little pill bugs, right? 1, 2, 3 of them. That is where we produce aerobic energy. So it stands to reason that if you add more of these, right? If I shoved a whole bunch more of those little mitochondria into the cell, this cell would be able to produce an ish ton of energy, right? Like it would just be a very high energy cell, and it would be able to consume more oxygen. So then if you consider like having more muscle mass, having more mitochondria, having more hemoglobin, having all of these materials inside your body that you develop through training over time, what's that going to do? That is going to make you consume more oxygen because you have more stuff in your body that consumes oxygen. And that's why measuring someone's VO2 max is such a great tool at our disposal, right? If we go to that Rockport walk test that we were talking about, the whole point of that test is to be able to measure your VO2. So if we had like a 35-year-old client who weighs 250 pounds, their heart rate at the end of the test is 156 beats per minute, and it took them 16 minutes and 17 seconds to walk the VO2 max. They didn't do very well, right? Their VO2 max, the maximum volume of oxygen that they can consume per minute, is about 28.79 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute, right? So that's not great. That's not very much, right? But let's say they lose a little bit of weight, right? They've been working with us for a little while. They take their Rockport walk test again, and they get it all the way down to 140, and they drop a minute off of their VO2 max. So now they lost 25 pounds, their heart rate went down, and they dropped a minute off their test. And I hit calculate here. Well, now they're suddenly doing fair. They went from consuming, what was it? What did I say? 23, 28 milliliters of oxygen to 36. That's way better. That's a huge improvement. They lose a little bit more weight. They're down to 200. Heart rate's down to 135. Let's say this time they just dropped 30 seconds off. So we'll say 1447. Hit calculate. Now they're average. They're consuming 40 units of oxygen, right? Their VO2 max goes up. So your VO2 max is a terrific way to tell like how efficient your cardiorespiratory system is. However, with youths, they don't really have a traditional VO2 max because of like the general shape of their body, the structures inside of it. So instead we have what we just call a peak oxygen uptake, which means that essentially like they are going to be able to start like breathing, and they're really not going to be able to develop their cardiorespiratory system the same way that like adults do. So like, don't get me wrong, like if they drop below sort of like what the baseline 12-year-old statistics are, right? Then yeah, they're going to struggle. But for the most part, like all kids under 12 are going to experience pretty much the same thing when it comes to cardio. As it is, honestly, guys, 12-year-olds are 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds are 11-year-olds. Like across the board, they're pretty basic, pretty much the same until they hit puberty. And then that's going to be where like training effect starts to take more of like an emphasis, right? The 13-year-olds, start going through puberty, right? 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, maybe sometimes as early as 11, right? Start going through puberty. They start to experience like hormonal changes and things like that. Now it's like, okay, well, the ones that do cardio are going to start developing, they're going to be better at cardio, like as they go into adulthood. The ones who start lifting weights, maybe they're going to be better at lifting weights. And then we're going to start to see what we call morphological changes, because that's what, hormones do, right? So, because of this beforehand, though, let's kind of go back to without the, look back at the lack of VO2 max, right? You know, children are going to be much less efficient at exercises that are at a higher intensity or a higher percentage of that VO2. So meaning like the harder you work, normally we tap into our anaerobic energy stores, right? We tap into like glycolysis and things like that. Kids don't have that. They don't have enough like cellular volume because they're little tiny bodies. They literally do not have enough cellular volume to be very good at anaerobic exercise. So while kids tend to have like a peak oxygen uptake and they are very good at the aerobic stuff, they are absolutely terrible at the anaerobic stuff. So if you've got two kids that are both the same age and you make them start running, they can run all day at sort of a low intensity. But if you made them like race and like sprint as hard as they can, yeah, one of them is going to come out on top. But then they are both going to be completely exhausted. And like their ability to kind of dig into that is very limited. And if you were also to like measure the difference between like, let's say like Thomas, let's say we measure the difference between like your jog speed and your sprint speed. There would actually be like a pretty big, you know, mile per hour difference there, right? Look at the difference between like kids though, that curve is going to be much flatter. And that's because like they don't have that anaerobic booster button, you know, that we as like adults have. They don't have that anaerobic capacity. So that's a big part of it as well, which means that like we are going to exercise in general. It doesn't make any sense for us to train at high intensities if we're training youths because they don't really have a capacity to grow that way, right? So because of that, because youths are less efficient at anaerobic activity, that's high intense activity. So think anaerobic means an is opposite of, right? Aerobic means oxygen. So this is opposite oxygen. They don't have that oxygen ability. They're anaerobic. They don't have anaerobic like capacity. So because of that, they're really good at the aerobic stuff. They're good at like long, you know, this is why kids have energy for days, you know, they can run around all day at like a low intensity, and coast at like, you know, nice and slow, but just consistent, you know, like ha, 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 hours later, ha, 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 you know, like running around. But their anaerobic stuff, they're not good at. So because of that, like, because they're less efficient at it, heavy exercise at maximum intensity doesn't make any sense for us. It makes no sense to train youth that way. So you're going to notice that like most of the adjustments we're going to make today are to do higher repetition, lower intensity exercise. Doesn't mean that children cannot increase strength. Children will absolutely develop strength. They'll develop bone density, but they will rarely gain muscle mass. So their strength is often going to come from neurologic adaptation, their nervous system getting more efficient at things rather than like gaining in muscle mass, right? So that's like a big part of this as well. Not saying that it can't happen. You know, obviously, like if a kid does like bodybuilding every day starting at age 6, they'll will eventually gain muscle mass. But like if you look at like the length of time that it will take compared to like how long it normally would take for an average client, it's crazy because they're just not very efficient at it, you know? It would be like if I went to like boost up my bank account, you know, rather than depositing, you know, let's say $1,000 paycheck, right? Rather than depositing that, imagine if I like brought in like a penny and I was like, I'll see you tomorrow for the next bit, you know, and I just slowly like, and eventually I'd reach $1,000, but it's going to be a lot of trips and it's going to be very slow to get it in there, you know, like that's kind of kids when it comes to like strength and muscle mass gains. It can happen. It's just not very efficient. So instead, we focus on them gaining strength and gaining aerobic capacity. And then that aerobic capacity can support their energy production when they become like, you know, teenagers or when they become adults. And they'll have this really strong foundation to sort of work from. So they don't really have the glycolytic enzymes necessary for high intensity. They're not good at glycolysis. You know, the two places where energy production takes place, right? If we look at sort of your classic animal cell here, and I'm just going to kind of copy this image. if you look at your sort of classic animal cell, and I'm just going to delete most of this. Actually, let me delete this here. Section here. So obviously there's a lot of structures in here. Kids are going to have the totally normal cells. But if you see like the mitochondria, right? The mitochondria is where, you know, this is where aerobic, just gonna type it. Right, so that's aerobic energy production. That's the with oxygen. Right, kids are great at that, right? But see, here's the cytoplasm. It's all the fluid. See how this is not, this part here, it's really kind of not pointing to anything, right? We see how this is just kind of in the cell. All of your cells are swampy. They're all fluid, right? That cytoplasm, that is where aerobic or anaerobic energy production happens, right? So that's anaerobic energy production. That means without oxygen, right? And that's high intensity. So that's where that's going to take place, right? Is right there. So there's a huge difference between those two. This is all of the like fluid, right? Taking place here. Whereas the mitochondria, yeah, we're looking at these little guys here. So big difference there. Big difference in terms of how we produce energy. Kids, they don't have the enzymes necessary to produce energy in this fluid. You know, they don't have those enzymes. So that's okay. You know, they're really good at the other one. Now, when it comes to training, we still really love youths engaging in like physical activity and engaging in exercise and, you know, doing stuff like that. It may not necessarily be like strength training, even though they will get stronger. You know, they're not necessarily gaining massive muscle mass, but that's, you know, that's all right, right? So we are going to see a lower risk of injury in youths, which is really great. One of the biggest benefits of getting youths to engage in exercise is the fact that like they basically become like injury proof later in life, as long as they don't like over push it, right? If kids like sprain their ankles, then they need to make sure they do, you know, rehab so they don't become more prone to ankle sprains as an adult. But like, you know, we know that like youths that engage in physical activity do have a lower injury risk later in life, which is great. Most common injury we're going to see is ankle sprains, by the way, that lateral ankle sprain. I talked about that in kinesiology. That's the biggest one, right? But they will also increase bone density, right? Which is really great. We know that means less incidence of fractures and things like that as well. So when it comes to using NASM's OPT model, right, which is that staircase, for the most part, we are going to keep kids in stabilization and strength endurance. We might do a little bit of power as well, which is actually very anaerobic, but we train it in sort of an aerobic fashion. So instead of doing power in the way where it's like, all right, maximum effort jump, right, big anaerobic thing, it's like maybe 8 repetitions. Instead, it's like, okay, we're going to do squat jumps for the next 30 seconds, which is like little tiny squat jumps that they have to like do a lot of. So it's not a maximum effort power training version, sort of a minimum effort power. So that's sort of a rule break in a way. You know, if I pull up the rules here, you know, if I pull up our big chart of rules, right? And Eddie, you haven't seen this yet. Any of the new folks watching, you guys haven't seen this yet, but we will dive into this. You know, let's scroll all the way over here. So here's all of our rules, right? You do these power exercises for 3 to 5 sets. You do about 8 to 10 repetitions at the most, super explosive tempo, and you do it at up to 10% of your body weight, or maybe 30 to 45% of your 1 rep max. And you take this big, long 1 to 2, or maybe 3 to 5 minutes of rest afterwards. That's high intensity power. So we wouldn't do that this way with our youth clients. Our youth clients would probably do up to 10% of body weight, which would probably just be body weight if we're being honest. And they would probably do higher repetitions. And they would do like, much lower intensity. But generally phases 1 and 2, those are going to be the most effective. We're probably going to spend most of our time there, which is like very low intensity, So this is the first chart we're going to see. You'll notice that we can plug a lot of this information here into our SOAP notes really effectively later. So I'll show you an example of that. But the mode of things that we prefer for youths when it comes to like, remember our FIT principles, right? Frequency, intensity, time, type, enjoyment. The type 1, type 1. I'm like, did I get my fingers right? Is going to be walking, jogging, running. Those are all going to be fine. But we all know kids, right? Games, activities, sports, playing in the water, all that stuff tends to be the most fun. That is a very effective sort of type. And then resistance training, and if you're doing resistance training, chances are you want to do it as like a circuit training, something that's going to keep kids moving, keep them physically active, right? Keep their brains moving, because kids get bored so easy. Frequency we're going to see is 5 to 7 days per week. With a frequency that high, you can bet that our intensity is probably going to be relatively low or mostly based on cardio, which we see right here, right? Intensity, moderate to vigorous, and then primarily cardiorespiratory exercise. Why primarily cardio? Again, it's aerobic, which is what youths are good at. It's not anaerobic, which youths tend to struggle with. So if you're running like a youth boot camp, you're probably not going to have to invest in super heavy weights. You're probably just going to invest in like a speed ladder, a couple cones, and stuff to like run around and jump on, little 2.5 to 5 pound, maybe 10 pound weights at the most, and that 10 pound weights is for like leg stuff. You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff. That's a cheap boot camp. This is why Jay Howard's doing so well. He's like, he's got really simple, easy equipment to run, duration 60 minutes per day. We do know that there's sort of an inverse relationship between like intensity, duration, and frequency, right? As intensity goes up, duration and frequency go down, right? But with youths, it's all aerobic. So we're seeing all of it kind of just high, except for the intensity. Intensity is low. Our movement assessments that are going to be most important for our youth clients. We love the overhead squat. That's going to be a really big one. We like the 10 push-up assessment, although you'll notice that's a slight discrepancy as well, Thomas. In the youth class, we taught you guys the right angle push-up test, which is just a maximum push-up test. That's a little bit more of a specific one. That's probably better, rather than like, let's see how much you can bench, little kid. Right? Like, what's your 1 rep max?
He's like,
nobody cares. Right? Yeah. But we love like a good upper body endurance test. So it's like, how many push-ups can you do if you did one every 2 seconds? 1 rep every 2 seconds. That's a really, really, really great one. And then, so now we've got a little bit of like upper body stuff. We got a little bit of lower body stuff. And then the single leg stance. If they can tolerate it though, go into the single leg squat assessment, right? Let's test their balance. Some kids won't have the balance necessary, so they just do a single leg stance assessment. You just have them stand on 1 leg and see if they're shifting their hips at all, if their knees buckling in. If none of that's happening and they're like really solid and it's like, wow, you got a great foundation, you got good balance, kid, squat, have them squat on 1 leg. Then you can start to see like, does the knee buckle in or not? If we see the single leg, this is like what happens if you have an overhead squat and your client absolutely crushes it. Like you have them do the overhead squat and they have just perfect form on that overhead squat. We go to the single leg squat instead. And what we're going to look for is, some adjustments here. Actually, that's the advanced version. I actually only let you guys. There we go. So see how, actually, that's not bad. Never mind. That's a good demo. I need a bad demo, internet. Come on, hook me up. There we go. So if you see this, see the knee cave in, means the same thing as the overhead squat does. But if I have a client who just kills it, I'm like, well, somebody's got to have some overactive muscle, right? So then I start digging a little bit deeper and do this version here. Great assessment. So if your youth can handle it, go for it, For the flexibility continuum, regular old flexibility continuum, nothing crazy there. Eddie, I know you don't know the continuum just yet, but basically if we look at the OPT template or OPT model, oh wait, no, I have it right here. So here's the type of stretches you're going to choose based on your client. So regular continuum, right? If your client's in stabilization, give them static stretches. If you have them in strength endurance, do active stretches. And if they're in power, you can do dynamic stretches. So normal continuum there. We're not really too worried about that. And then resistance training. Here's our general rules here. So you're going to see, we're going to say 1 to 2 sets of about 8 to 12 repetitions at about 40 to 70% of your 1 rep max. So if you've got a kid that you're training, generally you're going to keep it around 1 to 2 sets. And you're probably going to stay in phase 1 of the OPT model before you move on to phases like 2 or maybe phase 5. When it comes to your strength training. By the way, personally, I will say, like, I think if you want to go beyond 12, like you want to go 12 to 20 and really bring your reps up super high, that's actually really effective as well if you're going for cardio. But if you're going for strength, I know that like sometimes we associate strength with like, I think we associate it with like, 6 to 12 reps or maybe even 1 to 5 reps, like real heavy powerlifting style. Yeah, absolutely. With kids though, their strength is 8 to 12. We keep the intensity lower so that we can keep the reps higher. They don't have the capacity to work. If you have them only do 5 repetitions, they're gonna be working plenty hard, and they may even struggle for that 5th rep. They may be like, and it may look just like it does with any other client, right? But their biologic capacity for growth in that rep range just isn't very high. So it's like the results that you're gonna get there. Like I love training for 5 reps, by the way. I think it's a great rep scheme. It just doesn't work very well with kids. So instead, they're going to get a lot more out of 8 to 12.
What about like let's say if I want to like add like a pyramid type style, or like let's say if I start them off with 12 reps, right, in the first set, and then they get like a comfortable weight that they're able to do at that range,
Sure.
and then on the next following set decrease the rest by 2, and then maybe up the weight by like maybe 5 to 10 pound increments, and then
Sure.
maybe that would help. But I don't know if that's effective for kids though.
If you did that though, you'd probably just do like a 3-tier pyramid and go like 12, 10, 8.
Yeah, 12, 10, 8.
Yeah, or 8, 10, 12. By the way, you can also do reverse pyramid. That works really well as well.
Oh yeah, that's
where you strip a little bit of weight off instead. Both those are really good. I would say, that's where you're using, like, pyramiding is very much like a strength plateau buster. I wouldn't use pyramids just as and this is a general rule of thumb. I'm not about youths, but just in general, I don't really use pyramids like very regularly. I think they're a great plateau buster. But like as a traditional training tool, I think straight sets actually work a little bit better. Or you could do what I like to do if I'm really trying to go for strength. Like I love going for like reps of 5 for a week. The next week, go reps of 3. And then the next week, go reps of, you do a reverse pyramid, 3 sets, 5, 3, and then retest your 1 rep max. And then recycle 5, 3, 5, 3, 1, 5, 3, 5, 3, 1. That's one of my favorite strength routines.
That's like powerlifting stuff, huh?
That is very much powerlifting. Yes. If you're going bodybuilding, you'd probably go like 12, 10, 8, 6, and then probably, actually, no, that's 4 sets. Yeah, you probably, then if you want to do that on your 5th week, 12, 10, 8, do a reverse pyramid or a regular pyramid.
Right. Cool.
All of them are good.
Awesome. Yeah.
I like pyramids. I do. I think sometimes people like, they'll like get results on pyramids, and then they're like, oh, pyramids are the way. And, and it's like, they are, but the reason you got results is because you did a new stimulus, And if you do that and it becomes not new, it stops working. So then, that's why I like to cycle through different training techniques.
Yeah, same likewise. Like I've done that for like a good consistent like 6 to like maybe a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then I noticed like, okay, well, I'm not seeing too much results, so I gotta switch things up.
And it
Yeah.
lasts. You have to
Yeah.
keep going, you know?
Yeah.
Same thing is true of like drop sets. Like drop sets, people will look at it. They've looked at drop sets efficiency or efficacy, and they're not really better. But I think that is not true if it's new.
Yeah, if
Like
it's
drop
new.
sets can be a great way to breast up your plateau and then, get off of them after that. Do maybe 4 weeks of a drop set once a year,
Yeah,
when you start to get stagnant.
for sure.
Love that. So,
Awesome.
so last little thing here, special considerations. Progressions for youth populations should be based on postural control, not on the amount of weight that can be used. So, and that's honestly, that's true for literally every client you have. But just make sure that just because your client can do more weight doesn't necessarily mean they should if their posture is bad, right? Like if I've got a client, like let's say I've got somebody doing like a shoulder press, right? And they're like, they're like 1, 2, and then like their last one is like, and they get it up, right? Or they like use their bend their knees. It's like, all right, I did it. I completed the set. Let's go up with the weight. It's like you completed something that was similar to the set. like, that's an elephant seal, not an elephant. So, and then other special consideration, always make exercising fun. That's going to be a big priority with youths,
Oh, for sure. Like you said, like, because that reminded me, like, when I had this coach, and most of the workouts were really, really boring. And until like there was a different coach that, substitute or whatever, and then
Mhm.
we just like adding like some crazy fun stuff though, like to like I don't know, we're just doing like a lot of high intensity stuff. It was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it's a blast, right? And then you want to
Yeah.
go. You want to go every day.
Yeah, and like you said, like most kids also like they're not really like into that strength type of like,
Yes.
like they're more into like the aerobic, like the
Yeah. Some
keep
can
going.
be, but if they are, again, just keep
It's
it.
very little, yeah. Because I remember like in middle school, there was just one kid in class who was like super jacked, like you know what I mean. And it was funny because he was a skinny kid. I was like, yo, how the hell did you get it to that point? It was like, just eat a lot of chicken, man. Just eat a lot of chicken. And I was like, what?
He's got a
It's
bodybuilder
crazy,
dad.
dude. But that dude has like big arms, man. Like that dude
Yeah.
was big. I was like, dude, how'd you get that big? He was only like he was like 15. I was like, Jesus Christ.
That kid deserves even more credit than he was probably getting, because biologically, he climbed an uphill battle.
Yeah, and he was
Um,
skinny, dude. He was a skinny ass
yeah,
guy, and he
he
just like,
fought his biology, and that's what I mean. Like sometimes you'll see kids who are jacked, and
yeah.
it's like,
But
or
not
like
everyone's like
honestly,
that,
I say the same thing about female bodybuilders.
right?
Female bodybuilders who are natural deserve so much more credit than we give them. Like they get a lot of credit because it's like, wow, if they're natural, how the hell did you fight biology? Like women don't make as much testosterone as men, so gaining muscle when they have that much muscle mass, it's like it's like, wow, you are the hardest working person on the planet. Like, because there's
Yeah,
no other way you got like that if you hadn't been.
yeah. And I doubt that guy was taking anything because he's only like what, like 15 at the time,
Right,
and
yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah. So good on him. Love that.
yeah. Hell yeah.
Any questions on youths, guys? Any comments? Thomas, how you feeling?
I'm good.
Checking in. Eddie, you're good.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. Let's do seniors here. This one's going to be a little bit brief. Like I said, we've got a whole, we have a 10-day youth class where we do much more detail. We also have a 10-day senior class. So we're working our way through that as well. But looking at it, we are estimating that by the middle of the century, so like 2050, right? About a fifth of the population will be 65 or older. That's 20%. Of people, 1 in 5, right? That's crazy. And so because of that, like that's gonna be a lot of people who are like retired, a lot of people who, their physical activity and their adulthood, in their youth, in whatever their past part of their life is going to determine how easy the rest of their life is. 65 is not the goal. Like we're gonna live, I want to live to be 90, like that's several more years. I don't want that last 25 years to be like me walking at a snail's pace. I never want to be that guy in the grocery store that I'm constantly stuck behind when I'm at the grocery store now. Where I'm just like, God, can't get around them, like so that is going to be making sure that we, the big thing here is we want to be like physically moving, right? So we need to know some of the physiologic differences as well, because like with that many people, we're going to have a lot of senior clients. So there's going to be a lot of physiologic changes, a lot of chronic disease that we're going to be dealing with. There's going to be two big ones that we're going to see most commonly. And this is why heart problems are such a big deal for seniors. We are going to see arteriosclerosis, which is the thinning of your blood vessels, or atherosclerosis, which is like the hardening of your blood vessels. So if we look at like arteriosclerosis, right? It's literally going to be like blood vessels that walls are just a little bit thinned out, right? Like as we get older, they're actually not showing me a good picture here. They're showing me a bunch of pictures of atherosclerosis because these are always put together. But as we get older, like picture any senior that you guys know. It's like almost like their skin is thinner, right? Like paper thin sometimes. The same thing is true of like your blood vessel walls, right? Like they just tend to get a little thinner. Something like that, it's going to be easier to tear. Tissue paper is easier to tear than cardboard, right? That's what's going to happen there with arteriosclerosis. We're also going to see atherosclerosis, right? So we are going to see these materials kind of build up, where original will maybe have like a fatty streak that builds up until it has plaque that then starts to harden. That plaque it hardens because like our immune system is like, I don't know what that is. And it clots it, right? It basically is trying to like, build it up and kind of like harden it. Your immune system attacks stuff. If it's damaging you, your immune system is going to try to kill it, So when we see that start to happen, and like now we've got like a thin, again, let's picture tissue paper, right? That is now also like hardened. And then all of a sudden you try to like run a fluid through it or, pressure through it, right? What's going to happen? It's going to burst, it's going to crack, right? And that's what we start to see in our senior clients. This is why we have so many blood vessel disorders associated with our senior clients, right? We see hypertension, high blood pressure, right? Which then all of a sudden we have blood pressure problems, right? You've experienced like probably like low blood pressure before. If you've ever been like sitting around and then like your door rings, you're like, oh, somebody's here. And you like pop up out of your chair and like go to run over there. And all of a sudden like the world darkens for a second. You're like, ooh. And then like you kind of kneel down for a second, like, ha ha ha. And then you get up and everything's fine afterwards. That's actually a very sudden, dramatic loss of blood pressure to your brain. Basically, you left all of your blood in the chair. Like your body is here, your blood was over there. So that's a very sudden drop in blood pressure. And so when your brain doesn't get any blood, it kind of freaks out for a second and goes, oh, and it knows that blood travels very easily this way versus this way. Like horizontal travel is a lot easier than vertical travel. So your brain goes, okay, we don't have any, lay down, and then, you pass out. That's sort of what's occurring in that instance there. So when you have high blood pressure, that's a much more common occurrence because like maybe blood gets stuck in your legs or blood gets stuck in your digestive system, or it can get stuck in your upper body too. So arteriosclerosis, very, very bad. Atherosclerosis, very, very bad. That's going to lead to things like that happening. That's also going to obviously mean that like we're going to have areas that maybe don't repair quite as easily as they're supposed to. That's not going to be good because they aren't getting oxygen delivery. And then we're going to have a hard time supplying the various tissues of the body. We're going to have trouble getting, blood and oxygen and things like that, nutrients where they need to go. And that is why these diseases are so prevalent. So we're going to talk a lot about all of them. We're going to talk about coronary artery disease, which is basically atherosclerosis in the heart itself. We're going to talk about peripheral arterial disease. We're going to talk about varicose veins, right? We look at varicose veins. Look at this. That is literally where blood pressure was so bad that it all started pooling in the legs. This is where they clearly repaired it. But so what happened is the blood vessels, your veins, there we go. Blood started pooling in them because the heart wasn't strong enough, or maybe it was just there wasn't blood flow enough. It was too difficult to get blood out of the legs. So it started pooling in the legs and it stretched those blood vessels out. And it's very painful.
Jesus.
Yeah, it hurts, and then we see like the regular like spider veins. You see this kind of thing all the time too. That's actually an example of varicose veins, just not a very severe example. And you will just generally see that in seniors,
That's true. I noticed that.
Yeah, it's very common. Those are sort of the non-harmful varicose veins, but the other ones hurt, Now, imagine if that happened in a freaking artery, which is much larger and the walls are much thicker. That's really painful. So anyway, we'll talk about that in a couple of days. So the two most common ones are going to be sclerosises, right? And so we definitely see that a lot in our senior clients. Now, other things that are going to happen in seniors, we're going to see a lower max heart rate. Remember our formula for max heart rate? It's a very simple formula, but it's just 220 minus your age, right? So for me, that's 33. But in 10 years, it's going to be 220 minus 43. Now my max heart rate was 187. Now my max heart rate is 177. When I'm 53, right, it'll be 167. So as we get older, our max heart rate does go down, which means like we do need to adjust our heart rate formulas. If we're trying to make somebody work at a percentage of max heart rate in the same way that we make somebody work at a percentage of their, 1 rep max for lifting. If my 1 rep max is 200 pounds, I want to work at 50% of that. I'm going to lift 100 pounds on the bar, Same thing is true on the treadmill. We don't use a number like 6.5 or anything like that, but we use a heart rate number, right? It's like if my max heart rate was 187, then 50% of that is whatever it was, 93 and a half, right? 94. If it was 177, it's 88. If it was 167, it's 83, right? So these numbers are going to shift as we get older. We got to make sure that we're being cautious of that. So lower max heart rate and then lower cardiac output, right? So cardiac output is the sort of like overall output of your heart. It's the function of your heart, and it's two different components, right? It's your stroke volume, which is the volume of blood per beat. If your heart is weaker, less blood's going to move through your heart per beat. And then the other one is your heart rate, which we know is going to come down. So when both of those things come down, the overall performance of your heart is going to be less. There's just less blood running through my heart now than there was when I was younger. Well, that's probably not true. As I become a senior, it starts to become true. Around your 60s, it starts to rapidly change. I don't know that it's true right now because training and stuff like that.
That's what the goal is, to be this guy right here.
What's that?
The goal is to be this guy right here. This guy's doing muscle ups, man.
Oh, the old senior man. I love
Yeah.
videos like that. I freaking love that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That was, dude. This is so sad. The memorial I went to this weekend was actually an ex-Sochi student. His parents invited Mo and I out. And he would do muscle ups like all the time in the gym. He was
Jeez.
like a young kid. He got in a motorcycle accident. Ugh.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. But he was like so good at muscle ups. We'd be in class and I'd be like, all right, so when you're doing a pull up, you want to make sure that your hands are about this width. And he'd be like, he's like, what about for muscle ups? And you're like, I'd be teaching a lecture and I'd look over and he'd be over there like powering them out. And I'd be like, ah, I was like, you're
Damn.
showing me up on my lecture. Punk.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, the muscle up is very interesting.
It's hard, man.
It's
For
really
me, it's the
difficult.
flip. I can do bar dips and I can do pull ups to my clavicle. I just haven't mastered that flip.
Yeah, use a band though. That's what I did, and it helped a lot. But don't use too much. Just because like obviously you're gonna have your body to do a little bit of kipping, right? Because I think
Sure.
the band helps without the kipping, but either way, like you don't necessarily need to do it like just all like upper body strength to get up the bar. I mean, that's something that I want to personally,
Right.
master at one point, but everyone should just do it at a, with the kipping, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool.
100%.
Yeah. I was doing it this Saturday,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then a lot of
You're on the
people,
bar now, man.
yeah, and a lot of people were like asking me like, "Lo, how do you do that?" And like I heard this other Spanish guy, because like I'm Hispanic, so I wasn't able to understand what he was saying. He was telling
Sure.
the other guy that was using, because I was using the pull-up bar, the hard ones, basically the one that's just like they have like three different
Yes. Yeah. You're using
grips,
like the
right? And
real
then
grip
it's
one.
connected to like a whole like roping sections or like
Mhm.
lat pull down machines, whatever.
Yeah.
So I was there in the middle of two guys, working out, right? They were cool enough to like give me some space, right? Because you know how like you're able to move to the side a little bit.
Sure. Sure.
So they were doing that, and then one of the guys was like, "Damn!" Like in Spanish, he's like, "This guy's pretty strong, huh?" Like that's all
Ah,
strength. I was just like listening like to the conversation. I was just like, "That's
awesome.
funny."
Love it, dude.
Yeah.
Love that. You just got your muscle ups, right? It was like last week.
Yeah, yeah. I was
Awesome.
doing it for a week straight, just doing the band muscle ups, and then the next following week I was able to do one legit one, and then I was just cleaning them up. This what last week I was cleaning them up with the band, so I was doing like 3 sets of 10.
Ah,
So I would work on it for like pull day, and then I also did it on arm day.
awesome.
Yeah. And then just this weekend, I was practicing it without it. So I was just practicing for like 20 minutes, but in those 20 minutes, I was able to do at least like 12 reps of just one. But still, like, that's crazy
No, it's great.
progress. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
Yeah.
better. It's like you gotta think about like, holy crap, like I wasn't able to even get up the bar,
Yeah. That's where
at
it
one
starts.
point.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
I love it.
it's cool. Yeah.
So yeah, as we get older, lower max heart rate, which is going to translate to a lower cardiac output. We're also going to see a decrease in muscle mass. As we get older, we tend to shift from type 2 muscle fibers to type 1 muscle fibers. So we start to have like a little bit of, lower muscle mass, which means again, ironically, and this is the reason the youth and the senior are paired together in today's lesson, we start to put the emphasis back on high repetition. We start to do the lower intensity, high repetition stuff. So you're actually going to see that's very similar for our senior clients. We are also going to see a decrease in our balance and coordination, which is why focusing on our balance training will be absolutely key. And then as we get older, our tissue, our connective tissue in particular, gets less elastic. So we do see a decrease in our mobility, decrease in flexibility. So it becomes really important to make sure that like flexibility training sort of becomes a priority. And then we also do see a decrease in bone mineral density, which is why in particular, we do actually want to put the emphasis on gravity specific training, weight bearing exercise. Lifting weights is so important for senior clients and it doesn't get enough credit. But remember, right, lifting weights causes like those little microfractures in our skeleton, which means we keep our bone mineral density around. If we know that it's going to start decreasing, we want to sort of stem that. If it's going to arc like this, right, we want to train so that it arcs a little bit more like that, much slower, right? In the same way that we want to speed up our arcs when we're trying to increase our strength, right? Rather than it gets stagnant. We're doing the reverse here. We're trying to stagnate the bone density loss by doing bone density training, which is mostly gravity specific. That's why you ever see the power plate. The weirdest looking thing. These things are like 10 grand, but it's this machine that vibrates and it's super popular among seniors. It's this little plate here that just vibrates like crazy. It's at a specific frequency. So you get on it and it goes, and you're like, and you're shaking. But it's like you do your squats, you do your lunges, you do your calves, like whatever. It is very good for bone density. And there's even been people who are, now the big thing is like they're starting to combine kettlebell stuff with the power plate, and it's really fun. They're doing like now that the tech's a little bit better, they're starting to do like handleless versions where it's just a plate by itself, and it doesn't have like the top bit here. But the top bit's really important for seniors because it's like to help with the balance and give them something to grab onto. But it's a pretty impressive, pretty cool piece of equipment. So good for seniors in particular, or people coming back from like fractures and stuff. So our primary focus. Here's the thing. When it comes to training seniors, honestly, our biggest focus, this is going to sound so basic, but it is actually so critical, is maintaining the ability to walk regularly. Picture how many, like if you were to do an impression of a senior client, what do you do with your, this is an acting class or anything, but like, what would you do if you were trying to do an impression of a senior, right? You'd probably hunch your shoulders a little bit and you do this kind of walk, right? The little like old biddy shuffle is what I like to call it, right? That is the reason seniors do that. We'll spend more time talking about this in our senior class, but the reason seniors do that is because number one, they lose the confidence to take a large step, because they are afraid that they are going to fall, and every fall becomes so dangerous when you're older, because of the lack of bone density. And number two, they just don't have the balance. Like they will step and then lose their balance left or right or forward or backwards in between. So the lack of balance. So maintain the ability to walk is absolutely key. Preventing falls is a super critical issue, which is why we do so much balance training. It's going to be huge. Get your senior clients on one leg as often as possible. And then because of the, fears that they are going to have, don't create an intimidating environment. Try to create an inviting one. Make sure that your client is feeling very, very, very comfortable. And then, like I said, weight-bearing exercise, stuff that works against gravity is going to be key here. So looking at our little table here, right? So the mode, we love stationary or recumbent cycling. Those are ways that we can train the heart really effectively. Now, here's the thing. Stationary bikes, recumbent bikes, both those things are really, really good for the cardio. They are not weight-bearing exercise. So they are not quite as good for bone density. So if you can, but they are something that somebody can feel very comfortable on. Same thing with aquatic exercise. Aquatic is not necessarily weight bearing. It's a great way to strengthen your heart, no matter who you are. But they aren't necessarily as good for bone density. So if that's the case, you're going to need to do something to supplement, or you can get them on the treadmill. But these are areas that like seniors feel very uncomfortable in because they're worried about the balance, they're worried about the falling, right? So if you do a treadmill, make sure it's a treadmill with hand support. That's going to be super important. Frequency, about 3 to 5 days per week of moderate intensity, or they could get away with 3 days a week of vigorous intensity. Which is why what I prefer is maybe 3 to 5 days a week of walking regularly for light cardio and 3 days a week of like strength training, if I can get them to do it. I will say when it comes to strength training, if I'm doing my seniors, I almost never do upper body, lower body, or like chest, back, legs, things like that. I will often just do total body workouts pretty consistently, where it's a little bit of chest, a little bit of back, a little bit of shoulders, a little bit of legs every time. That way they never get overly sore in one particular area. We sort of work everything evenly. That's not necessarily the greatest way to gain muscle mass or to gain strength, but those aren't really my priorities with a senior client, which is why I think it works really well. If I do want to do a training split, I'll do A and B. I'll do 2 total body days and go like A, B, A, and then next week like B, A, B, and just alternate between A and B. But usually I do an ABC split.
Can you do like if it's like a 3-day training split, can we do like one upper body day and the other lower body rest and then a full body?
Yeah, could you do that as well? Yeah, I would say like that like I said, I try not to do anything that's going to leave them too sore in one particular area. But if you did something like that, I think that's a good distribution as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite like splits for bodybuilders as well.
Okay.
40 to 85% Vo2 max. So basically that means you're going to be in zone 1 and zone 2 when it comes to cardio. The 85 to 95% heart rate max zone, probably not super appropriate for our seniors. If they can handle it, go for it. But generally it's going to be, you know, somewhere like sub warm up to zone 1, which is 65 to 75% heart rate max, or zone 2, which is 76 to 85%. But above 85%, they don't, again, they lose that anaerobic capacity because they don't have type 2 muscle fibers. So why would you train for it? You know, about 30 to 60 minutes per day if they can handle it. However, if they cannot handle it, you're probably going to do like 8 to 10-minute bouts of exercise a couple times a day. Because it's about getting like the hours in. If they can't necessarily do a full 30 minutes because maybe they get exhausted, like if they can't go for a 30-minute walk, that's okay. Do 3 10-minute walks. Love that, you know. Our movement assessments, we like the pushing assessment on the cable machine. We like the pulling assessment on the cable machine, and we like the overhead squat. If they cannot do the overhead squat because maybe they're struggling with their balance or struggling with their strength, then we can do the sitting and standing assessment in a chair. There's a test I'm going to teach you guys called the Tug Test, which is also a chair assessment. And it's where basically you have your client, it's called the timed up and go assessment. So you have them sit up, they're sitting in a chair, they stand up, walk around a cone and sit back down, and you time it. And it's just an agility assessment for seniors that's very safe. But aside from that, you can always just have your client sit into a chair and stand, which is a squatting motion. If you see their knees cave in, you see them lean super far forward, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing a chair assisted overhead squat assessment, guys, if you need to for your seniors. And then single leg squat, probably not super appropriate. So instead we do a single leg balance. Although I will say if I've got a senior who can do a single leg squat, I'll make them do it. I'll totally break that rule if they can. But generally most of them will just do a single leg balance. When it comes to flexibility, for the most part, guys, you're going to focus on self-myofascial release and static stretches. So when we look at that like flexibility continuum, even if you have a client who's training in strength, you're probably just going to be applying corrective flexibility. So we like foam rolling and we like static stretches. I love active stretches, but they're not great. You know, they're probably just not what we're doing with our seniors. I like dynamics, but they're probably not what we're doing with our seniors. 1 to 3 sets, 8 to 20 repetitions. That's a pretty big range, you know? So it's just a little bit of, you know, normally if we look at our sort of rule list here, you'll see like hypertrophy starts at like 6 to 12. We're probably just going to start about 8. We're not really going to go any lower than that in terms of high intensity, but we can take it all the way up to 20, which is what we see. Up here, you know, we go all the way up to 20 repetitions in stabilization, which is why, you know, for the most part, we are going to stay in that stabilization range. Let me close all this here. It's starting to get a little bit messy. So when it comes to doing resistance and stuff, we'll probably be in stabilization and strength. Take them up to 20 reps. That's fine. That's a great way to build their endurance, you know. At 40 to 80% of their 1 rep max, obviously they're doing 20 reps, they're probably lifting at about 40%. They're doing 8 reps, they're probably lifting somewhere around 80%, 3 to 5 days per week. Phase 1 of the OPT should be mastered before moving on. And then we can do phases 2 through 5. You can theoretically do any phase with a senior client, but max strength, power, it doesn't make any sense. They don't have the capacity to grow in those ways anyways. So why would you train there? So for me, my senior clients, I keep them in phases 1, 2, and 3. I don't really go any higher than that up the staircase. Special considerations, your progression should be slow and based on postural control. Again, we're saying that they're just saying that's true for any client. Like any client, it should always be based on postural control. It should be progressed towards free sitting, or if you can, get them standing. If you can keep your senior clients on their feet as often as possible, that's going to help them walk as long as possible. Make sure their breathing is normal. Avoid that Valsalva maneuver that I've talked about. Do not let your senior clients hold their breath. Yes, holding your breath during like a barbell squat's a great way to create abdominal pressure and keep your disc from sliding around. But with your seniors, again, they have blood pressure issues, so we want to avoid that. And then be cautious with your foam rolling. If they can tolerate SMR and static stretches, great, do it. But if they can't, then instead you can do slow rhythmic stretches and avoid the foam rolling. Again, due to that inelastic, due to that like really inelastic connective tissue, if the foam rolling is super painful and they just can't tolerate it, it's not worth it. They're going to tighten up worse than anything. So we do want to be kind of cautious there. So any questions on the senior stuff, guys? Questions, comments, concerns?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So eventually, hopefully one day my mom decides to work with me.
Sure.
Because she had like thyroid problems, and eventually she gained a lot of weight from that. And also she just started realizing that her blood pressure's spiking, so now they're giving her like treatment for that.
Yep.
So, I want to get her in a healthier state, just to lose just to give her a healthy weight
Sure.
and for her to start moving. So she has like shoulder problems too. Like
Yeah.
I think she had an accident. Yeah, she had an accident at work one time. Like this was years ago. I don't know
Okay.
what happened really, because I mean I was a kid,
Yeah.
but they did have her do surgery. So obviously like throughout the years, like she hasn't been doing a lot of like movement. She doesn't have a good range of motion. So I'm definitely
Right.
gonna fix her up for that. But one of the things that kind of want to work around her legs is because like she has like this I don't know what's I gotta find out what that's called in English, but basically it's like a nerve on her leg that basically numbs her leg. And
Mhm.
sometimes like I think she had like a few accidents where she actually fell because
Just a little bit of
she
like
didn't have
that. Yeah.
enough like strength. Yeah, so definitely want to work our way around that. So um how would I
So I would say
make her work
start
around that?
kind of like a senior client, actually, very similar. Build a
Right, yeah.
foundation of working on the habit of getting used to exercising regularly by going for regular
Mhm.
walks. Get
Yeah,
up, get moving, work your way up to like a 30-minute walk. And then you can start working on incorporating like a lot of stabilization and balance training. And once you start doing stuff like that,
gotcha.
then you can get into like strength training later down the line. But like that's sort of like if you're thinking about like the beginning, middle, and end of a journey, right? Start with walking, and get like I like to like when I'm trying to like get somebody to do something like this who's like really new, start with just same time every day, get in that habit. You know what I mean? Like we are going to
Yeah.
do this at this time, and then we're going to do this at this time again the next. Get into that. Go for a walk every day. Then you start moving your walking days to like the off days, and then you start taking those what were walking days and doing like balance training and stabilization training, and then you start to get into like strength training later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's technically what I was doing too, the very beginning. But
Yeah,
I don't know, just like I need to
fall off the habit, right?
encourage her more. Yeah.
It's easy to fall off the habit,
Yeah.
so we got to work. We got to work
Yeah.
against that.
And on top of that, like what's really difficult for her, is that she can't really pay for her gym membership because she only works like twice a
Sure,
week. Sometimes even
but
once a
she probably
week.
doesn't need one.
Um,
Balance stuff is stuff you can do at home.
yeah, definitely. That's true. And then
Although
she
it
could
is
also
hard to do
walk
it.
outside too, like yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see what I could do one day
Heck yeah.
with her.
Let's talk more about it in
Yeah,
the senior class as we move forward. We can use examples.
for sure.
Speaking of examples, here is our fake soap note. This is little Billy. Uh, so this is our youth client because we're doing seniors this mod, so we did a youth one. His subjective information, he likes playing soccer, video games, likes watching movie, TV. He's a big Spider-Man fan. So we're going to incorporate some Spider-Man stuff into our workouts, probably Spider-Man push-ups, probably very relevant. He would love that. Favorite foods are pizza, mac and cheese, and fries, like every other kid. He sprained his ankle playing soccer, and he wants to be the soccer champion of the world. We also want him to be active 60 minutes a day, which is our goal, like, so you can see, you can incorporate like your goals and their goals. This can go in that subjective stuff. Objective stuff, he's 10, 85 pounds, 4'9". He's got a little bit of a low back arch and a little bit of foot flatten. We noticed like when his knee during the single leg squat, his knee caved in. So he's got some glute problems, we can definitely see it's like, oh, okay, well, when, he sprained his ankle, chances are his glutes started loosening up a little bit because he wasn't engaging them, wasn't stepping hard into the ground. And so he started to lose a little bit of glute strength. So that's something we're going to work on. So we're going to continue checking in with his overhead squat, 10 push-up assessments, single leg balance, and we're going to work on a 1/4 mile run rather than a full mile. Kid's only, how is it, 10 years old. We're not doing a full mile yet, like we're getting there. So cardio training before every game, play a set or a play session or whatever. We want him to just go for a quick little 5-minute run to kind of get himself warmed up. Maybe do like a speed ladder, do a couple laps, or play a cardio game. Any of those are going to be really good options. He's going to play soccer about 3 days a week. And when it comes to resistance training, we want him to do a little bit of strength training with a trainer once a week, but then he's going to strength train twice a week. So, now he's going to soccer, let's say Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, do a little bit of strength training on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then on the weekend, he's going to maybe have his soccer matches, or he's going to go out and play with his friends, whatever. When it comes to strength training, like we said, we're going to follow the rules directly. No lower than 8 to 12 reps, 1 to 2 sets. We're going to primarily focus on body weight exercises, circuit style, because that's going to be more cardio based, which is going to help with support the soccer. And we're going to keep him in stabilization for now. So lots of unstable kind of goofy stuff, Vo2 ball squats, things like that. And when it comes to his warm-ups and his cool downs, 3 to 5 SMR and static stretches before every session for now. And then we're going to put a particular emphasis on his calves, hamstrings, and quadriceps. And those are the areas that we're going to primarily focus on so that we can work on that anterior pelvic tilt and knee caving in action. And there we go. Simple as that.
Nice.
Any questions outside of the youth stuff or the senior stuff today, guys?
Oh, pretty clear.
Love it. Well, most people have today off. I hope you guys, thanks for coming in today, by the way. I know that it's Indigenous Peoples Day for some folks, but unfortunately that's not one of the Sochi.
Wait, what's today?
It's Indigenous Peoples Day. It's Columbus Day. Some people call it that.
Oh, okay.
That guy was a jerk, so I don't call it that anymore. But it's a national. I think it's like it's a national holiday, but it's not a federal holiday, so we didn't have today off.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but some people.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. If it's not LA,
Alright,
I don't think
cool.
LAUSD had it off today. LA was still.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I'll
Alright.
let you guys out of here. See you tomorrow.
For sure, man. I'll see you guys tomorrow. You guys have a good day.
Right now. Have a good one.
Later, guys.
See ya.